And so she has this like mushroom tea. I'm like, all right, well, I guess we'll try it. So, we drank the tea, we hung around the campfire, and I was convinced that, mushrooms don't work, or that at most they would be some sort of, mild side effects, and maybe things would look a little sparkly. And it was just this kind of overwhelming, it hit me a lot harder than I thought it was going to hit me.
Backcountry Colorado, hiking, backpacking.
I did a lot of marathons. I was convinced to do some ultras.
Climbing, and I do filming and photography.
I just like the ultras because I love the community. I just think that everybody is so nice, whether they're the first place finishers or, us that kind of mosey along.
Well, awesome. Well, welcome to the show, man. It's good to have you on. We're on here with Grayson Schaffer. He's a senior editor with Outside Magazine. He also recently started his own creative firm that we'll get into a little bit. Grayson, I want to get you on the show for a lot of reasons, really. One, you're just a passionate person of the outdoors. You've got a lot of experience, particularly in whitewater, an interesting story, personal story in your own right. You've spent more than a dozen years working for Outside Magazine, covering all kinds of great stories. So we want to get into a little bit of that. But also you're a, budding entrepreneur with your own firm that's doing some really interesting things. For one, I watched a video about Clare Gallagher that just about blew me off my seat. I just said, wow, this thing is so beautiful. Who produced this? And sure enough, it was your firm. So a lot to get into with you. But first, just for our listeners who may not be familiar with you, probably they've seen your byline but don't remember it, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, let's see. I've been at Outside for about the last 15 years and came there as an intern, more or less, right out of college, and have, kind of cut my teeth there writing online stories back when it was outside.away.com and the internet was not really a thing yet. And, we were kind of all wondering what would happen and what the future of print might be and lived through the Great Recession, made it through with budget cuts and other magazines kind of imploding one by one. And, we kind of managed to survive all of that and now thrive into this sort of digital mobile generation where most people are consuming stories on their phones and little tidbits and sort of all these new and different ways, and just trying to figure out sort of how to continue to be relevant in a increasingly fractured media landscape. So that's more or less where I came from.
So, well, a little on the outside. I mean, we all, obviously are familiar with Outside Magazine. It's, for most of us, our go-to source for kind of outdoor adventure news and it's good storytelling. I think the magazine's obviously very well known for just having very good writing, lots of authors, probably a lot of your kind of personal heroes or people that had cover stories in Outside Magazine. Can you just tell us a little bit about the history of the magazine itself and why you were kind of drawn to, start working there in the first place?
Yeah, Outside started as like an insert in Rolling Stone in the late 70s. And, I think for a lot of us, people of my generation, we kind of came into it reading John Krakauer and Dave Quammen and, a few of the other, Tim Cahill and some of the other sort of luminaries of
Krakow, my personal hero, absolutely. If you're out there listening, John, I know you're in Boulder somewhere. You got to get on the show.
Somewhere in an undisclosed location. Yeah, I mean, my
keeps to himself, I hear.
My personal hero was always Dave Quammen, who was writing his books about island biogeography and somehow making all this like really hardcore nerdy science writing seem really entertaining and appealing, and so he sort of managed to juggle the facts with real storytelling and all of that sort of thing. And so I finished college in 2001 and spent much of like the winter of 01, 02 at home in North Idaho and didn't have much in the way of internet connectivity or TV, and so I ended up just reading a lot of books and reading a lot of magazine stories. And that was, I think that was kind of the time period that kind of cemented this being what I want to do. You know, and at that time I had been a swamper in the Salmon River and Hells River Canyons from about age 15 to 17, and then a whitewater raft guide to try and pay for my.
What does that
kayak
mean?
habit.
What a swamper?
So the swampers are these. You know, I don't know if they still have them or whether they're legal or considered like indentured servitude now. But you know, back then it was sort of this. You know, life hack to summer camp, where instead of paying to go to summer camp, you would go and you know, wash dishes and help the baggage boatman set up camp and sort of do all of the odd jobs and the hard labor around
like a ski bum for the
kinda,
summer camp industry.
Something like this. Well, for raft trips. So you know, people pay high, you know, top dollar for these high.
Is that different than a dirt bag?
It is a close relative, and in fact, there's much overlap between the two. That, you know, you all live in your cars and exist off of the scraps that come back off of raft trips.
What's your personal take on the use of the term dirt bag? You know, currently, do you have an opinion on that?
As an honorific, or I mean, I think that maybe it's gone too far as you know, in terms of you know, using it as to hold ourselves up as you know, having a higher level of authenticity and grittiness than maybe we actually do, because I think even a lot of dirt bags are actually doing pretty well, and the true dirt bags, I don't know, probably don't aspire to that.
I want to get some true dirt bags on the show and get their take on this. If they want their mantle bag, it's like, hey, you got a job, you're not a dirt bag.
That's right. Yeah, no, I feel like I feel like true dirt bags would be offended to hear somebody like me, you know, try and claim that title.
Right. Well, so you kind of grew up on the water then at an early age. As a teenager, you got a lot of time on the water, and that's kind of where you got your outdoor bug. Yeah,
for sure. I think you know, you spend that time you know, doing kind of elevated things, getting your adrenaline up and being scared in the presence of other people who you really enjoy being around, and it's really hard to let go of that. I mean, I think that you know, trying to go from that into some kind of like office environment, it's just a recipe for letdown. And I think that people who have spent the formative years of their life doing exciting, interesting things have a hard time fitting in to you know, something that looks more like a traditional 9-to-5. And so I think you know, I think we all sort of struggle to try and figure out how to keep the dream alive, and you know, sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't.
Well, we were talking a little bit about the history of Outside Magazine and kind of the appeal for you. You know, talk to us a little bit more about that. You got your start kind of in journalism as an intern there?
Yeah. You know, one of the things, you know, back in the day, Outside was sort of known for having a really robust fact-checking department and really strong research department, and this was kind of always a really great tradition in publishing, even until recently. You know, magazines like the Condé Nast magazines in New York would have sort of entire research departments dedicated to making sure that nothing got out the door without being, you know, fully vetted and you know, gone over 5 or 10 times.
Well, we don't have those problems anymore.
And it's like, you know, I mean, there are still fact checkers, but obviously it's you know, the magazine industry has had a hard time competing with you know, the ad dollars going to social media, and in a lot of ways the media landscape in general has suffered as a result of that. And you know, I don't want to say that that's sort of, you know, what's led to, you know, whatever this sort of current you know, ill will there is toward the press or towards the media in general, but I mean, certainly the amount of money that has been allowed to flow into magazine and newspaper research departments is a contributing factor. So that's where I started was you know, in you know, making these kind of obscure phone calls to sources and asking them all these like weird questions to make sure that these writers who I idolized were getting their facts straight. And you know, from there you kind of get a sense of which writers are really the good ones, where, you know, you go through this process when you get a story and you highlight every fact that a writer puts in there, And then you go through and you start checking off the facts, and you start to realize which writers are writing, mostly facts and connector words, and which writers are, kind of filling the pages with fluff and filler. And you start to realize that the guys who you really respect, the ones who you want to be like, are the ones that are sort of writing with a real sense of density. And so that was, I found that was sort of one of the things that shaped the way that I wanted to go about it, was to write as densely as possible and to, try and report as deeply as possible. And so from interning to getting, my first sort of service packages and being able to write some travel stories and some gear stuff on into, getting those first feature assignments, which, it's like when you're just starting out, the idea that you would be able to write like 6,000 words and have some nice magazine publish it and have people read it or even pay to read it is kind of mind-boggling. But, I guess then...
Do you remember your first cover story?
I think it was probably on this ice swimmer named Lewis Gordon Pugh, who is a South African guy who kind of made a name for himself by swimming in extremely icy water, trying to swim a kilometer in the North Pole and another kilometer in the South Pole, and kind of having icebreakers open up little narrow slots of, sort of swimming lanes of ice for him in all these frozen seas, and then he would go and swim a kilometer or more in each of these places. So I went and hung out with him in South Africa. And I think that was probably the first one.
Well, to be fair, I was a newspaper reporter for about, 9 years, and I don't remember my first A1 story. But you've been with Outside Magazine. You're a senior editor now. You've been with them about 14 years? You said.
Yeah, 14 or so years. I'm actually an editor at large now, which means that I've left the building. So I no longer have an office, and. It's one of the best things about this job, for somebody like me who gets bored easily and would have a hard time sort of digging in and being able to be in a position sort of doing the same thing day in and day out. This job has been like having 50 different jobs, because every 3 months, I basically get to change careers and sort of parachute in on some other interesting person's life and see how somebody who's, operating at the top of their field, or somebody who's, interesting enough for us to want to profile them, how they're doing their thing. And that's been, I think, one of the greatest gifts that this career could have offered.
So your latest piece in Outside Magazine was on psychedelics. You took a trip with your girlfriend. You met kind of a shaman kind of guy. I like to just kind of like get the details out of the way so we can get to the good stuff here. So you took some psychedelics, mushrooms, I believe. You described it as being one of the best experiences of your life. I mean, that's what you learn in the subhead of the article, at least. But what I found interesting was actually the beginning part where you talked about you were in your late 30s. It sounded like you didn't use the term midlife crisis, but there was something going on just kind of with where you were at in life. So start there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the main thing is that by the time you get to your mid-30s, that patterns have developed. I mean, for all of us, I think patterns have developed in our lives where we do things out of habit and we don't know why we do them. And I think if you look at your life, you have a routine that probably looks pretty similar day to day. And, some of the things that you're doing in your day-to-day life are as a result of specific, deliberate, personal choices, but probably a lot of them are just a matter of convenience or have kind of evolved to, sort of fit other big picture decisions that you've made, like where you live and what job you do. A lot of the other things, like who you hang out with and, what your sort of sports are, what your workout schedule is like, what your diet is like, probably are as much a reflection of some of those big choices as, making actual specific decisions as to how you're going to eat, how you're going to exercise, when you're going to do those things. And so, I finally got to a point, and I didn't realize this at the time, but I got to this point where, I started to become aware of those things. And some of that was, trying psychedelics. Some of that was, I think, kind of changing up some of my habits, just sort of shaking the snow globe, as it were, just take a real strong reevaluation of those things, and to figure out which of those, which things that you're doing in life actually work for you, and which things you're doing as a result of habit without any real direction. And so that was kind of where it all came about from, was just trying to take a hard look at all of the various life choices that we're making.
And so where did you go, and what did you take?
This kind of all started last summer. My girlfriend and I went out scouting on an elk scouting trip. I do a lot of elk archery hunting in the fall. And so we were out in the mountains of New Mexico trying to sort of get a sense of, the elk patterns. And she was really nice about coming with me on this. I didn't realize that she had alternative motives. So we get to camp and we make dinner, and then she sort of announces that she has this tea. And of course, I've never done drugs before. I'm like, if you look at my various profile photos of the past 5 or 10 years, extremely clean cut. And so she has this like mushroom tea. I'm like, all right, well, I guess we'll try it. So, we drank the tea, we hung around the campfire, and I was convinced that, mushrooms don't work, or that at most they would be some sort of, mild side effects, and maybe things would look a little sparkly. And it was just this kind of overwhelming, it hit me a lot harder than I thought it was going to hit me. And, just sort of had these kind of like, waves of realization, and sort of being able to like see your sort of life and life choices with a sense of detachment and perspective, and, seeing the actual sort of, and this is, it starts to sound crazy, but like sort of starting to see the sort of various like energy fields that are all around you that are invisible most of the time. And you're like, wow, the world is quite a bit more interesting than I thought it was. And for whatever reason, you take with you after that, that sense of perspective. And, for me, that has kind of manifest in just a loss of interest in alcohol, an increased interest in gym fitness, in diet, and not in a sort of, New Year's resolution, January through mid-February, and then forget it kind of way. But, in a way that has allowed me to, create new patterns and new pathways that,
What's your personal situation? You got a girlfriend, Emma. I sent you an agenda earlier, so I just, I like to do my Google trick where I just type in the person's name and see what the most common search results are. And so for you, it's Outside Magazine. We've talked about that. And then number 2 was Emma. Number 3 was Instagram. Number 4 was LinkedIn. And then number 5 was girlfriend. So the girlfriend is Emma. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
All right. So who is this mystery woman?
She's a super interesting young lady who is she's into Burning Man and horses, and is working on her master's in environmental management at Harvard, and works at the Los Alamos National Laboratories doing some doing recycling, and is.
Well, hold on. You did say Burning Man and horses. Those were the first 2 things?
Yeah, it's...
Nice. Right on. Well, and what does she do with horses?
She rides them without a saddle, of course.
Of course, yeah. That is perfect. And has she gotten you into equestrian activity?
I had to do a profile of this guy who plays one of the Vikings on the History Channel Viking show. And I haven't ridden a horse in years, but prior to that, she gave me one lesson and taught me some terms so that I could pretend like I knew what I was doing, so that when I showed up, they at least didn't think that I was like some writer coming in from New York to hang out.
I've been on a horse
so,
once. Well, you hunt. I mean, shit, when you hunt, it's like, whatever. All right. So, and I read that you kind of forewent marriage. Was there like a situation where it was like shit or get off the pot, or what was that all about?
Gosh. Well, I was in a long relationship for 7 years or so. And it just, I don't know. I got scared. These things happen, and I guess it's after that I was sort of bouncing.
So
around.
have we taken marriage off the table completely, or now that you're with Emma, you're rethinking the situation?
Oh my God! Do not go there. Do not get me in trouble like that.
Hey, we talk about it all at Dispatch Radio. All right, we can move on. All right, well, let's talk about your entrepreneurial. I want to get back to a couple of those topics, but we're going to have you on as a regular. This was kind of just a get to know you, see if it's interesting. You obviously have an interesting background. I think the listeners are going to love you. Talweg, what the hell does that mean? That's the company that you started with your buddy.
Yeah. We needed a name. We were searching for all kinds of names. All the good ones are taken, unfortunately. And we found this one sort of weird geomorphological term that was not copyrighted, and so we jumped on it. I'm not sure if it was the right choice.
You were looking for a Wait, hold on. You were looking for a geomorphical term?
No. We just took this one because it was the only word that we knew that was not copyrighted. It's difficult to pronounce. It's Talweg, Talweg. It refers to the deepest part of the river, the most direct point of the channel. If there's ever a case where it's sort of the idea of run deep, run strong. It's where the Grand Canyon rafters of yore used to sink their glass bottles and have them bounce off the bottom and turn back into sand back when that sort of thing was still acceptable.
Wait, did you do the film that I watched about the young lady that was running the Grand Canyon and the wooden boat and trying to get past, get approval from the old veteran guy? Yeah. And it ended with a dramatic, she turned the boat.
It was going to be a boring movie until she almost broke his boat, and then it was great. It all worked out, and it worked out for her because she didn't break the rock, and it worked out for us because she almost didn't, because she almost screwed up the rapid, and we had the sort of the true emotions, and then it worked. So yeah, we got lucky there. And it's funny because
it was going to be boring because she was so good that obviously she's just going to shoot this thing no problem.
If she had done that, no problem, we would have had a really boring film. But thankfully, I was perched in the bow of that with a camera on my shoulder with a glorified trash bag over it to in case a wave came over us. And Ryan was crouched in my lap, sort of holding me in place so that I wouldn't fall out of the boat. And that was how we.
Wait, you had the camera on your shoulder?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You didn't have a rig or something.
No. We were strong manning it. It was if you had turned the camera around, it would have been a real. If you had looked back at us, it would have been pretty funny. Yeah.
Yeah. Well done. Yeah, that was a gripping. That footage still. I watched it a little while ago, but
it's funny because a lot of people, everybody now, it's we've all saved up and everybody has Red cameras now, but the only thing that really matters is whether something real happens in front of the camera, and if it does, then it doesn't matter whether you've shot it on a GoPro or or your cell phone or a Red camera. The emotion is real, and if you're shooting something where that's kind of feels staged or you're trying to sort of get somebody to act through, it doesn't work. So, I mean, I guess that's the.
So is that what your company is about? You're a creative firm. Can you explain just what your company does and what you're about?
So we do a mix of things. We do straight advertising work. We do branded content. We make movies. We do print ads. Anything you can think of. But the bulk of what we've been doing lately is shooting these kind of short movies for companies like Yeti, REI, Porsche, where
no big deal. you started with the mom and pops. That's good. You got to start small and scrappy.
Right. Well,
right.
Here's the thing. Before we did that,
the Porsche budget's got to be nice.
Before we did that, before we did the In Current, the one that we were just talking about in the Grand Canyon with Yeti, they weren't doing video before that really, and so that kind of set the stage for all these Yeti movies, and it's been really amazing in that. They basically give you a lot of leeway to try and shoot an actual film, which is really difficult because a lot of brands, when there's huge amounts of ad money and that kind of thing at stake, they don't want to send you in there sort of hoping for the best. That generally doesn't work for people whose jobs are on the line. But Yeti is they're willing to take risks on that kind of stuff, and I think that if you ask around and say who's doing a good job at this kind of video stuff, I think that a lot of people would say that Yeti is producing some great little films, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're willing to take risks and willing to sort of turn documentary crews loose on real subjects and see what comes back. I think some of the other brands that we've worked with still, that's a tough thing to do because it's scary.
And so you started this firm with your buddy last year?
Yeah. So this is a friend of mine, Ryan Heffernan, who's a commercial photographer, editorial photographer based out of Santa Fe. And, we had done some of this work for the New Mexico Tourism Department. And, it's just kind of grown from there.
Oh yeah, and then you guys got the tourism contract, didn't you? Don't you do their?
We do.
Explain what you do.
We do New Mexico. True, yeah. That's one of the ones that we do.
Yeah. So for just two guys that decided to start a company in 2016, and you've got this big state contract. It's I think, and you're working with Porsche and REI and Yeti.
Fortunately, there are more than. Fortunately, there are a lot more than just two of us now. So we have help, and I think that's one of the reasons that we're able to be successful is that we try and find people who are smarter and better than we are to make things good.
What does it mean that you're not that large editor at this point? I mean, how much time are you spending with Outside Magazine versus this creative endeavor, entrepreneurship endeavor?
No comment. No, I think it has more to do with sort of a project by project basis. But when I have an outside project, I dive into that and become immersed in it. And when I have one of these film projects, we have a few days of pre-production, and then we go and we shoot and we shoot and we shoot and we don't sleep. And we go out on the boat in Costa Rica and throw up over the rail and try not to lose the drone, and then we come back and hopefully have a film in the
Don't lose the drone.
We always isn't it? That's like a rule. Like anytime somebody's gonna fly, you're always gonna lose the drone. Like that's the rule. Like,
you're gonna lose the drone.
It's gonna go in the ocean.
It's gonna happen.
It's gonna go in the tree.
The drone may come back, but it won't come back the same drone.
That's right. That's right.
So on your various bios around the interwebs, you've forced to list activities that you do. You list in this order: ski, bike, hunt, fish. Can you explain that order? Is that a meaningful order to you?
I'm not sure if it's meaningful. I would say that skiing has always been my lifelong. That's the thing that if I had to drop everything and just have a crappy car and a pair of skis, that's it. I would be like, I'm gonna live in this in this Datsun and use this one pair of skis.
Snow all year round.
You don't need. It's like skiing is one of those sports. You don't need a whole lot to do it. It's like you can gussy it all up with helicopters and fancy hotels, but like it's like at the root, like all you need is your skis and your boots and a pair of skins and a burrito. Like that's it. It's super simple, and really everything else beyond that is optional.
All right, so bike,
love riding cross country. I'm terrible at going downhill. I would ride 5,000 feet uphill and then take the road down. That's a terrible admission. I admit it. I do it. I ride the Windsor Trail.
Well, are you just afraid of being injured?
It's like age? For whatever reason, I didn't get into biking until I was in my 20s, and so it doesn't.
You are pushing 40.
Oh my God! Don't say that. I'm a millennial.
Yeah. I am too, brother. Hey, come on. Yeah, barely, buddy. You're like right at the threshold.
You know how like they keep
Wait, hold on. Are you in the 70s? You're in the 70s.
You know how they keep talking about all these like millennial snowflakes who don't like their feelings getting hurt. I'm a millennial snowflake. I don't like my feelings getting hurt.
No, you're not a millennial. No. All right. So biking, you like to do the biking. You don't like the downhill. Hunting. How much you do a lot of hunting?
Love hunting. Would do as much of it as I could, nice. But it takes a lot of time.
I wondered if that was something you just put down, like you did a couple times, but it sounds legit.
No, it's my that's like fully my guilty pleasure. Like when I am like around in polite company and like we start talking about like firearms and all the sorts of various ways to do in big game.
Like, get her done.
I know, and it's it's like one of those things that I've had to start like sort of watching who I, just make sure that you're in the right company before you talk about it, that sort of thing. But like, it's.
So what kind of hunting do you, what do you enjoy doing?
My favorite thing is any kind of fowl involving my yellow Labrador Cooper. I would, travel over hill and dale to
an activity with a dog.
Yeah, that's the best. Just because like it's like Old Yeller, we're a team, and he looks at me and I look at him, and then the bird flies up and I shoot it, and he goes and he tries his hardest to find it, and it's like we have this little reunion, and it's great. Besides that, probably almost at the same level of that is archery hunting for elk, which, I mean, for anybody who's been in the elk rut and sort of had bulls bugling 20 yards from them, but they can't get the shot, I mean, then you understand. It's like it kind of triggers something primal in you that you did not know existed in modern humans, but it does, and it's in all of us.
So what is the right question to ask an archery elk hunter at this junct? Do I ask you how many elk you have bagged? What do I ask you?
Here's the sad thing: not that many, because it's really difficult, and
I would imagine it's rare, and I don't know if the number would mean anything to me.
Well, that's the other part about it. It's like
four.
if you want to shoot a lot of elk, get a rifle. But if you want to like spend a lot of time really close to elk and like have a lot of close calls and a lot of great stories, then do archery. And when you finally do connect on a, and that's the other piece of this too, is like, I mean, if you wanted to shoot a cow and sort of just be
shoot a cow?
A cow elk. Just to be getting meat for the freezer. Which
I grew up in the South. We did cow tipping, but I don't know. Maybe you guys did it different.
It's a little different, but the sort of the highest form of hunting is to hunt for your freezer, right? And you fill the freezer and you eat the animal all winter long, and I love that. When you're putting in for some of these archery tags, part of it is that you're making it more difficult for yourself by, instead of trying to just shoot any elk that you see, that you're actually trying to shoot like the big old bull. And that makes it exponentially more difficult. It means that you go years without actually killing anything. It means that you spend a lot of time watching the ass end of huge elk run away from you. And, once in a blue moon, if you're extremely lucky, you actually, shoot one of these things. So it's...
I feel like I have a somewhat similar story with fly fishing. I started fly fishing with my dog, which is, stupid, because the dog just splashed in the water. I never caught anything. Yeah, every once in a while she was, would stay out of the water. But I just had fun walking up the river with my dog and, had a good time. I didn't catch many fish, but that really wasn't the full point for me.
Well, it's like, it's very similar, like trout fishing and elk hunting. It's like, first you want to catch a trout, and then you want to catch a big trout, and then you want to catch the difficult trout. And I think that elk hunting is similar in that, like, you go in with a rifle and you shoot a cow, and that's not that difficult. And then maybe you shoot a bull with a rifle, and then you sort of want to sort of make it incrementally more difficult so that you still have this element of uncertainty in the game. And, I think a lot of people will have, would have things to say about, whether it's fair to be chasing or, elk around at all. But I think having done it and sort of seen how difficult it is, to actually do it well and to do it on public land, which is, one of the things that makes, I think, that makes this country the best country out there, is the fact that like any old guy can get an elk tag and go out and chase these, what would ordinarily be only available to the sort of richest people in society, that, for $50, you can go have a good shot, a decent chance at shooting like a world record bull if you're willing to put in the, effort and the legwork. So, I think that's sort of one of the...
All right. So since you didn't give me a better question, how many elk have you bagged with a bow and arrow? And have you had any like weird close calls where you like maim the elk and you freak out and you got to like do it again?
Oh my God. No. So I've killed, with a bow, I've killed 2 elk. With a rifle, another 2.
All right.
Have I had any close calls? I had one. And this is, this is kind of one of the dirty little secrets of elk hunting, and just to say it straight up, which is that, I think a lot of people sort of hold up archery as like being more pure, and in a lot of ways it is. It's definitely more difficult statistically. This should make sense to everyone, which is that, a sharp a sharpened blade at the end of a pointy stick is a lot less lethal than a high-power rifle round. And so necessarily in archery, the percentage of elk that get wounded is higher. I had one, I guess it was a few years ago, that I screwed up and nicked an elk in the shoulder, and I think he was probably fine. I never found any blood, but still, that was one of those things where, you sit there kind of shaking for 20 minutes or half an hour afterwards, trying to figure out what had happened, and your head is spinning a little bit, and you just resolve to be even more sure and to be more careful the next time. And the next time it did work out, and it worked out just fine. But I think a lot of elk hunters, and especially if you watch some of these like elk hunting videos and that sort of thing, it always sort of either goes perfectly or you don't see it on any of these blogs or hunting websites and that sort of thing. And I think for the most part, people are pretty reticent to talk about when it doesn't go perfectly. And of course, I think you'd be hard pressed to find any hunter who hasn't had some experience like that. It's just not something that people like to talk about.
Well, Grayson Schaffer, you're an international man of mystery to some. I mean, you've written about a ton in the outdoor world. You've done a lot in your own personal life. You've just started your own creative firm. We didn't even touch on the Clare Gallagher movie, by the way. I need to touch on that. Did you do some of the cinematography for that? I think it was an REI sponsored video on Clare Gallagher. She's a boulder runner.
That's right. Yeah, she's amazing. We got to hang out with her in her family's cabin up above Breckenridge, and then followed her around Boulder with some of her amazing running pals, and then
Rocky Mountain Runners over there in Boulder.
Yeah,
yep, those are our peeps.
Yeah, such a cool group there. We had a joke. We pulled up for that shoot, and we were like, sort of joking about the level of athleticism that's in this group, and we were like that at the beginning of each run they tell all the bronze medalists to get in the back, and the gold medalists kind of go up in the front, I guess.
Right, exactly. So I'm particularly picturing a shot of her grandfather out at it must have been the Breckenridge house that you're talking about, and it was a reflection in the pool of water. So was that you that shot that?
I did shoot it. I definitely shot a reflection in a pool of water, but I'm not sure that's what it was.
Yeah, all right. But you shot like the stuff with her dad or her granddad?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, that's beautiful stuff. So we've just scratched the surface on some of the stuff we're going to touch on. We definitely look forward to getting you back on the show. Just as a little teaser to remind our listeners, we're going to talk. You've covered a lot of climbing. The Dean Potter is something that we wanted to talk on. I rewatched Valley Uprising, and I feel like it's rife for an update just with the Tommy Caldwell stuff and just what's, it's going to be needed. It's going to need to be updated every probably 3 or 4 years at the way things are going. But you've covered a lot in the climbing community and kind of what's going on there. Lance Armstrong, we didn't even talk any about that. Mount Everest. These are all things we want to get you back on the show and talk about. How can people follow you, find you? I know you've got your own website if they want to follow along with you.
The easiest way is just Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, which is all just Grayson Schaffer.
Oh, you make it so easy. All right. So, guys, Grayson Schaffer. And then last, before we leave you, just quick thoughts on Lance Armstrong. We haven't seen him in the headlines much recently. Just what's the latest, or is that done? Are we going to hear from him again? Is he over? Is he old news?
He has been laying low, but we have not heard the last of him. And right now he is working on a sports lifestyle community that if you Google him, you will find a little bit about it. You won't find that much about it. But he's out there, he's working on it, he's trying to figure out if he's got support for it. And I think, you'll probably be hearing more from him in the years to come.
Yeah, right on. Well, hey, thanks for talking with us, and we'll look forward to having you back on.
Thanks so much.